said to Gehazi, tuck your coat into your belt, take my staff in your hand, and run. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. But the child's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him, the boy has not wakened. When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy laying dead on his porch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got on the bed and laid upon the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. As he stretched himself out upon him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out upon him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. And he did. And when she came, he said, take your son. She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. And then she took her son and went out. Now, just to give you, for you note takers and you historians, a little insight here to this story is taking place somewhere around 931, 933 BC. The United Kingdom, that is the United Kingdom of Saul and David and Solomon, has been divided up. The 10 northern tribes, Dan, Benjamin, Reuben, Gad, Ephraim, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, and both half-tribes of Manasseh followed Jeroboam, as the prophet Isaiah had said. The southern tribe of Judah, Simeon, now had been consumed, and so they followed Rehoboam. And our text takes place, I'm sorry, it was written in 931, but the story takes place about 850 BC. Elisha was God's prophet to the northern kingdom of Israel. He was the son of a farmer, Shaphat, and an understudy of Elijah, who found him behind oxen and plow. At Elijah's ascension into heaven, Elijah picked up the mantle that had been anointed and thrown to him, used it to part the Jordan, and began his prophecy. You know, the older I get, one of the things that I often question myself, especially since we got this little recreation place in Missouri, and it's right beside a graveyard. And I jokingly say, and I found out, and I got to meet my neighbors who are the trustees of the graveyard, that there's no charge to be buried in the graveyard. I thought that was pretty cool. Because I said to Bert, you know, one day we're going to have a place big enough that when the Lord's done with me, I'll have a place that I can be buried. And I always made a joke out of it. Well, then we get this place and there's a graveyard right next door, and then within the first day that I meet my neighbors, they're telling me, yeah, anybody can be buried there and it's free. So, I mean, you can actually look out the trailer that's on the property, and you can look at the headstones. And the man told me, he says, yeah, you can be buried anywhere you want, but if you're thinking ahead, he said, you need to put some sort of a thing over there to reserve your spot. So I told Roberta that right outside the living room window of this trailer, I was going to put my gravestone right there, so that if I go before her, she can just sit there and watch TV and look out, and I'll be right there. So, and it doesn't cost anything. So I learned a lot about graveyards then, you know. I learned that, do you know in a graveyard which direction that you face? Most graveyards are always laid out that you're facing east. A lot of people don't know that. That your head is at the stone and your feet point to the east. It's interesting, there's a lot of reference done to the east. Which gate was Jesus supposed to return in through? The eastern gate, wasn't it? And so I didn't know those things. I got about 3 of my neighbors whose feet are on my side of the fence. We believe that to be true. It's cool. We're going to just let them go, you know. They've been there for some time. There's actually people in that graveyard, I think it goes back to like 1700 and something. We're having a hard time getting the etchings. But, you know, as I'm walking through and looking, it's pretty peaceful. And Someone told me that Missouri was a dead state, when we were looking. I was just looking for cheap property. But I understand why they said that, because there's like graveyards everywhere. I've never seen a place that had that many graveyards. It's like, people just die off and there's nothing out there. It's country, so the kids move into the city because that's what kids do, right? Life's never exciting at home. We always got to go somewhere. We got to go to the other side. We got to, get what's ours and go. And a lot of times then we end up coming back. I was kind of like that. When I was young, I was hell-bound for glory. Then after a while in the service, I realized that, that wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And I like those quiet little places right now that when I was a kid I didn't used to like. But there's a lot of graveyards there. Man, as Roberta and I joke, it's like population 321, and we're wondering if they're talking about live or dead people. But there's a graveyard on every corner. And my one brother is my younger brother is actually, he's really into history and family trees, and he likes to go to the graveyards, and some people do the etchings in the graveyards. I never, I go there to pay my respects to people or whatever. As a pastor, I often find myself in a graveyard as we're interring someone, committing someone to the Lord. And but I have read a lot of tombstones that they have on them. I wonder, have you ever given any thought? Maybe some of you are going to be cremated, and maybe not. But have you ever given any thought, if you're going to be buried in a graveyard, what if you had a say in it? And pastors love when you have a say in it. We have a pretty young church, so I haven't been knocking on everybody's door, but generally in most of the churches I have a good portion of my desk that has to do with what an individual would want at their funeral. Things like their favorite hymn, their favorite song, their favorite Bible verse. I mean, have you ever thought about your death? No? I don't blame you. Nobody wants to think about that much. But I think it's good to think about all things and to be prepared for all things. I hope that by the time that the Lord calls me home, not only will I have thought about my death, not only will I have thought about what will happen shortly after my death, but I'll be moved in my heart to leave something to the church. I wish more people would do that. I know, again, we have a very young church, and we don't talk about that much, but it's something to think about. I mean, if you're a person of wealth, or if you have something, I mean, if God's important to you and you've been part of a church your whole life, maybe when you leave, you'd like to leave something to the ministry, something for the Lord's work to continue in your absence. I mean, if we live with Jesus for eternity, we just don't get a free pass when we leave here, amen? I mean, it's something to think about. Now, I don't have a whole much of anything, so these younger preachers that are coming here, don't get your hopes up. You're not going to get too much from me. But you can get my Bible maybe, I'll leave what I can. But I think it's important to think about that. And I wonder, when I'm dead and gone, will I have made a difference? Will you have made a difference? What would you want your epitaph to read on your gravestone? Anybody ever thought of that? I mean, you see them, Let's say you got some loving children or a loving friend, or you planned ahead and you could get put on there a lot of them engraved letters. They're pretty expensive, a piece. So you want to figure out how to say what needs to be said in the shortest time. As a pastor, when death approaches a family, I know a lot of people don't think of what the pastor deals with in death, but one of my concerns is to also work with the family so that the undertakers don't rip them off. And people don't rip them off because you're at times of grief. I've seen undertakers trying to sell people $1,000 nightgowns so when they get to heaven, they'll be looking good for their husband who passed on before. I've seen people trying to sell people certain types of caskets and stuff. Dead noses smell no roses. When I'm gone, I used to tell my wife, just cremate me and spread my ashes over the canyon somewhere. I'm not here. I'm somewhere else. Now that I got a free grave, I might just tell her to stick me in there so I can look at her in the window. But I've thought about mine, and, you know, I mean, as a pastor, when someone dies, you have to speak about the person. Sometimes you have people that can give witness and testimony. You got about an hour's worth of time to get the special songs in, the hymns in, the Bible verses in, the eulogy in, the whole bit in. You know, so in an hour's worth of time, we're to sum up an individual's life. And on a gravestone, we're to sum up that individual. Here lies, you know, Solomon Grundy, whatever. Born on Sunday, christened on Monday, buried on Tuesday. Anybody know that one? Anybody know? Am I getting that old? Goodness gracious. Here lies John Doe, born 1940, died 19-something. Beloved mother or father and son. Or here lies so-and-so, father, son, and soldier. And I all these different things. I mean, what would yours say? Best thing I can come up with for me is loved God, loved people. I think if I could die in that integrity, what a powerful thing that would be. And then I could say, I must have made a difference because I loved. Have you loved? I mean, really loved. And what is love? Oh, we could turn to 1 Corinthians and we know that love is patient and love is kind. Love doesn't envy and love doesn't boast. It keeps no records of wrongs. But what is love to you? We look at this woman, and depending on your translation, we see that she was a woman who was great, who was significant in some sort. And the story begins that Elijah is traveling through this town called Shunem. In other words, he was kind of like a traveling preacher. He went from town to town. This woman probably was a good cook because he liked to stay there. He stayed there as often as he could. It was one of his favorite places to stop. And she enjoyed his company so much that she actually